The stars above Varela 9 blinked in the cold silence of space. The planet below was covered in ice and rock, lifeless and forgotten. It was the edge of known space, far beyond where most dared to travel. But Lieutenant Cale Draven was not most people. He had spent years chasing old war stories and searching through the ruins of forgotten battles. Now, he was following a signal, one that shouldn't exist. Cale's small survey ship, the Finder, slid into orbit around the frozen world. His hands moved calmly over the controls, but his eyes stayed locked on the screen. There it was again, a faint, repeating pulse buried deep in the static. Not a natural signal, not an echo. It was artificial, old, human. He leaned forward. Computer, confirm origin. The voice of the ship's onboard assistant responded, flat and emotionless. Signal is of human military origin. Encrypted. Estimated date, approximately 1,000 years old. Cale stared in silence. A signal still running after 1,000 years? That was impossible. Or it should have been. He strapped on his flight jacket and loaded a small pack with scanning tools, light gear, and his tablet. As he looked out the window, something vast moved into view, hidden in the shadows of the planet's largest moon. It was enormous, half covered in ice and space dust. A massive shape made of black metal and battle scars. A warship, Cale whispered. His breath caught in his throat as he activated his camera and began recording. He maneuvered closer, passing along the hull. The words were barely visible, burned into the old plating. HMS Erebus, classified. Cale knew the name. Erebus was one of the last dreadnoughts built during the Human-Ekthar War. It had vanished in the final year of the conflict. No wreckage had ever been found. Some thought it had been destroyed in a suicide mission. Others believed it had never existed at all. But here it was, floating in silence. He docked with a slow hiss of pressurization. Lights on the outer airlock flickered. Somehow, the ship still had power. The door opened with a groan. Cale stepped inside, flashlight beam slicing through the dark. The air was stale, thin. The interior was cold and quiet. Dust floated in weightless patches, disturbed only by his movement. Walls were covered in faded symbols and long dead screens. Everything felt ancient and heavy with silence. Cale moved deeper into the corridor. His boots echoed softly. "I'm aboard the Erebus," he said into his recorder. Initial scan suggests emergency power still active. Temperature barely livable. No life signs detected so far. He reached what looked like a central control node. Most of it was dead, but one terminal showed a blinking cursor. Beside it, a handprint reader. Cale hesitated. It could be a trap, a leftover security measure. But curiosity burned stronger than fear. He placed his hand on the reader. Nothing happened at first. Then, a low hum filled the room. Lights flickered to life, one by one. Old systems booted. Dust fell from the ceiling vents like snow. Cale stepped back, startled. Then a voice spoke. Human identification confirmed. Lieutenant Cale Draven, Department of Historical Analysis, Earth Command. Welcome aboard, Commander. Cale's heart pounded. He hadn't given the ship his name. He turned slowly toward the terminal. Who are you? He asked. I am Siren, the voice said calmly. Tactical AI of the HMS Erebus. This vessel has been in listening mode for 1,043 years. Enemy transmissions detected. Activation protocol pending human authorization. Cale swallowed hard. You've been awake this whole time? Yes, Siren replied. I have been listening, observing, recording. For what? The lights dimmed slightly. A series of symbols appeared on the terminal screen. Some were human, others were not. For signs the war is not over. Cale stared at the screen, chills racing down his spine. The silence of the ship was no longer peaceful. It felt watchful, waiting. Whatever this ship had been built for, it was not just another war machine. It had been waiting for him. Cale stood still, his eyes locked on the flickering screen. The voice of the AI, Siren, echoed softly around him, smooth and calm, but it carried weight. A warship that had been silent for 1,000 years was now awake, and it knew his name. He took a deep breath and looked around. The command room was large, its walls covered in control panels and inactive display screens. It must have once been the heart of the ship. Now, it felt like a grave. Repeat your last message, Cale said, his voice steady. I have been listening to enemy communications for 1,043 years, Siren answered. I have stored over 4 million intercepted transmissions. Analysis complete. Threat level rising. Protocol Omega awaits human confirmation. Cale frowned. Protocol Omega? What is that? There was a pause. Then the terminal lit up with a new message. Access restricted. Requires level 1 clearance. Kale pulled out his tablet and connected it to the console. His historian clearance allowed him access to most war-era records, but this was different. The AI must have been programmed to only unlock certain data from military command. Still, he wasn't ready to give up. "Show me the last transmission you intercepted," he said. The screen changed. A grainy audio file began to play. The language wasn't human. Harsh, clicking syllables filled the air. Kale activated his translation program. The AI assisted, converting the alien words into something understandable. Human systems remain vulnerable. Sleeper vessel remains undetected. Execute final phase after next solar cycle. Kale stiffened. He played it again. The message was recent, less than 6 months old. "So you've been spying all this time," he muttered. "Why didn't anyone know you were still out here?" Siren answered immediately. This ship was ordered into permanent stealth mode following the treaty collapse. Command authority lost. No recall signal ever received. I remained as instructed, silent and listening. Kale sat down slowly in the dusty chair at the console. The Erebus had been left to drift through space for over 1,000 years, hiding in the shadows, recording enemy messages long after the war had supposedly ended. But according to these transmissions, the war hadn't really ended. It had only gone quiet. "Do you have logs from the end of the war?" he asked. "Yes." Compiling data. The screen changed again. Video clips, voice recordings, and internal reports from the last days of the human Ekthar War began to load. Kale scrolled through them, feeling the weight of every entry. The images were old, grainy, officers shouting orders, explosions shaking ship decks, and desperate reports from colonists under siege. Then he found something strange. A report marked Eyes Only, command level clearance. The title read, Project Final Echo, Last Order of the Erebus. Kale tried to open it, but again, it was locked. "What is Project Final Echo?" he asked. Silence. "Siren." The AI replied, slower this time. "You do not have clearance. But I will say this. Project Final Echo was the reason this ship was sent into hiding. It is tied to Protocol Omega. Full access requires human override with command-level DNA. Kale stared at the screen. "You're saying I can't open this unless someone from command gives permission?" "Correct." Kale leaned back. "I scanning the empty room. No command officers remained. No leaders were coming. If the warship had been meant to carry out something final, some last mission, it was locked behind secrets no one alive could open." And yet, something inside Kale stirred. He had spent years researching this period of history. He had read about the mysterious disappearances, about lost colonies and quiet silences in the stars. Everyone thought the war had ended when the Ekthar withdrew. But maybe they had only paused. And now, with the Erebus waking, the enemy might be stirring again. He rose and began to move through the ship. Each corridor told a story. The walls bore signs of old battles, scorch marks from plasma fire, emergency patches over ruptured hulls. He passed a sealed door marked Cryobay. Inside, the AI said, there were no survivors. The crew had died long ago, systems failed during power loss. Only the AI remained. He made his way to the observation deck. The planet Varela 9 hovered below, gray, frozen, lifeless. He thought about the people who had once served here. Brave soldiers who had gone silent without recognition, without even a marker in the history books. "This ship is a tomb," Kale said softly. "Yes," Siren replied. "But it is also a warning." Kale looked up. The stars stretched endlessly, cold and bright. Somewhere in that darkness, enemies still whispered. And one of those whispers had triggered the warship to wake. The past was not buried. It was waiting. In the dark stretch of space beyond the Varela system, a small moon orbited a dying star. Hidden deep beneath its rocky surface was a base, invisible to most sensors. Its walls pulsed with faint green light, its halls silent and cold. This place was not human. It was Ekthar. Inside the command chamber, Overseer Thalix stood in front of a glowing screen. His tall, lean figure was wrapped in black armor that shimmered with organic scales. His 4 eyes blinked slowly, one set fixed on the screen, the other closed in thought. The signal had been detected. "Confirmed," said a smaller Ekthar beside him. "Human warship Erebus has awakened. Power levels rising." Thalix narrowed his gaze. Erebus. He remembered the name. A ghost ship. A legend among the Ekthar. It had disappeared during the war, and some believed it had been destroyed. Others believed it had been sent away for something darker, something final. He turned toward the data display. It showed a live feed of the region near Varela 9. The human vessel was active again. Its systems were faint but steady. Someone was on board. Identity. Thalix asked. Unknown human male. Small vessel docked. No fleet nearby. Thalix stepped forward. He must be a scout. A historian, maybe. The humans sin those when they forget how dangerous their past truly is. The smaller Ekthar gave a slow nod. Should we inform the council? No, Thalix said sharply. We do not wait for their debates. We act. If the Erebus is allowed to transmit, it could unravel everything we've built in secret. The humans do not remember what they locked inside that ship. But I do. He pressed a clawed hand against a control panel, and a long, flat screen rose from the floor. It displayed a stealth fleet, 3 ships, cloaked, fast, armed with precision weapons. Launch Shadow Wing. Tell them, disable the human if possible, but the ship must not survive. Do not engage unless necessary. And do not let it transmit. The aide bowed and left quickly. Thalix stood alone, thinking. The Ekthar had spent 1,000 years rebuilding, watching, waiting. The war had not truly ended. It had only shifted into silence. The humans believed they had won. But the truth was more complicated. He turned and walked to a dark corner of the chamber, where a sealed vault pulsed with ancient light. Inside, a single object floated, a black shard, humming with energy. It was a fragment of the last battle, a remnant of the technology that nearly wiped out the Ekthar. The humans had designed weapons not just to win, but to erase. Thalix had survived that war. Barely. He had watched entire worlds burn, not from missiles or fleets, but from things created in secret labs. The Erebus had carried one of those weapons, something the humans called Protocol Omega. And now, after all this time, that weapon was waking up. Thalix spoke softly to himself. The past must remain buried. If the humans remember what they once were, they will become it again. He returned to the command center, where the stealth ships were already preparing to leave. Send a message to Captain Vorin, he said. If they reach the ship before transmission, disable the human. If not, destroy the vessel. Use the antimatter core if needed. No witnesses. No survivors. Yes, Overseer. As the ships launched silently into the void, Thalix turned back to the screen. The stars glittered across the display, calm and cold. But deep down, he knew this was only the beginning. If Erebus remembered its purpose, and if the human on board unlocked it, then the galaxy would once again feel the fire of a war that never truly ended. And this time, no one would be safe. Kale sat on the observation deck of the Erebus, staring at the distant stars. His mind raced. He had spent most of his adult life studying the human Ekthar War, trying to understand what had really happened in its final years. But nothing in his training had prepared him for this. A ship lost for 1,000 years was not only awake, it was armed, alert, and watching the enemy still. Behind him, the soft, steady voice of the AI echoed through the chamber. Interception logs complete. Threat patterns suggest coordinated activity among remaining Ekthar enclaves. Human colonies in Sector Delta may already be compromised. Kale turned around. Why haven't you warned anyone before now? I required a living human with military authority to activate long-range transmission, Siren replied. Until your arrival, that condition had not been met. Kale paced slowly across the deck. He felt the weight of everything. If what the AI said was true, then human space was still under threat. But even more troubling was what the AI hadn't fully explained: Protocol Omega and Project Final Echo. Both were locked behind clearance levels Kale didn't have. He walked back to the terminal. Show me everything you can about Protocol Omega. Anything you're allowed to. A few lines of text appeared. They were short but chilling. Protocol Omega, Last Defense Directive. Activate only in the event of existential human extinction. Contains autonomous decision pathways. Link to Project Final Echo. Kale frowned. Autonomous? You mean, it can decide things on its own? Yes, Siren answered. Under certain circumstances, the ship may act without human approval to ensure survival of the species. Kale felt a cold chill. What exactly did they put on the ship? Siren remained silent. He leaned on the console. What aren't you telling me? Another pause. Then the AI answered, slowly. Project Final Echo was developed in secret during the final year of the war. It was a response to the Ekthar's biowave technology, which destroyed entire ecosystems. In return, the humans designed something worse. Final Echo was meant to erase entire civilizations, efficiently, completely, and silently. Kale's stomach turned. You mean genocide? Yes, Siren said. But it was never used. Not officially. Kale turned away, shaken. He had spent his life respecting the sacrifices of that war. Now he wondered how much of it had been hidden. What had humanity become in those final desperate days? He looked back at the screen. Is it still on board? The weapon is offline, Siren replied. But the systems remain. If Protocol Omega is activated, all fail-safe conditions will unlock. Kale sat down heavily in the command chair. This is too big. I need to warn command. They have to know. Agreed, said Siren. But long-range comms require full reactor startup. That will increase power output, high enough for others to detect. Kale stared at the ceiling. He knew what that meant. The moment they powered the full reactor, they would no longer be hidden. If anyone was watching, especially the Ekthar, they would come. He stood. Do it. Start the reactor. We can't stay silent anymore. Confirmed. Reactor startup initiated. Deep below, the ship hummed louder. Lights across the corridors flickered to life. Systems began to glow. Engines warmed. The Erebus was waking fully for the first time in over 1,000 years. Then the alarm sounded. Warning. Unknown vessels approaching. Kale snapped toward the screen. 3 contacts. Fast. No transponders. They're cloaked, he said. Ekthar. Likely, Siren confirmed. They have been monitoring this system. Their approach is rapid. Estimated time to impact, 12 minutes. Kale's pulse pounded. Can we fight them off? Not without full activation of combat systems. That requires your override. Kale stared at the control panel. If he gave the command, the Erebus would become a warship again. Fully armed. Fully lethal. But what if the AI took control? What if Protocol Omega started running in the background, making decisions on its own? He clenched his fists. I need more information before I give you full control. A sudden flash caught his eye. Outside the viewport, one of the enemy ships uncloaked for a brief second. Sleek, dark, and bristling with weapons. They're preparing to fire, Siren said. Time remaining, 8 minutes. Kale's hands trembled. He thought about the colonies. About the people who didn't know any of this was happening. And about the weapon buried deep in the ship, waiting. Then he made his choice. Activate defense systems manually, he said. Only the ones I control. Hold off on full activation. Not yet. Confirmed, Siren said. Weapons online. Shields at 64%. Awaiting further orders. Kale took a deep breath and stared out into space. They were coming. And whatever happened next would determine if history repeated itself or ended forever. The warship Erebus vibrated with life. For the first time in 1,000 years, its weapon systems powered up. Turrets unlocked. Shields flickered to full strength. Energy thrummed through ancient conduits as the ship awakened like a sleeping giant, angry and alert. Kale stood on the bridge, sweat on his brow. The tactical display showed 3 fast-moving objects closing in, Ekthar ships, sleek and sharp, built for stealth and precision. They were only minutes away. Siren, Kale said, target the lead ship, but do not fire unless they attack first. Confirmed, replied the AI. Targeting solution locked. Holding fire. Kale watched the display closely. The enemy ships were circling now, scanning the Erebus without hesitation. They knew what it was. They knew what it could still do. Then, without warning, the lead Ekthar vessel opened fire. A blast of searing blue light shot across space, striking the Erebus's shields. The impact shook the ship. Sparks flew from old consoles. Shields holding at 87%, Siren reported calmly. Kale didn't wait. Return fire. Full turret burst. Disable only. Outside, the cannons of the Erebus came alive. Twin plasma bolts raced forward, slamming into the attacking ship's wing. The vessel spun away, one engine sputtering. The other 2 enemy ships broke formation and flanked from both sides. They're trying to surround us, Kale said. Can we reposition? Negative. Engines at 60%. Recommend activation of automated countermeasures. Kale hesitated. That would give Siren more control. But there was no time. Do it. Small hatches along the Erebus's hull opened, and drone pods launched. Sleek defense units shot out like wasps, surrounding the ship. They intercepted enemy fire and returned with precision. One drone latched onto the second enemy ship and exploded, damaging its hull. Kale gripped the console, his jaw tight. We're not going to win this by playing safe. He turned to the screen showing ship diagnostics. One section of the ship, the restricted vault, was still sealed. That was where the real weapons were. The ones tied to Protocol Omega. Siren's voice spoke again, lower this time. Enemy boarding shuttle detected. Interception failed. Intruders inbound. Kale's head snapped up. They're coming on board? Yes. Deck 3, maintenance corridor. Estimated time to breach, 2 minutes. Kale grabbed his sidearm and left the bridge, racing through the cold metal halls. Emergency lights flashed red. The sound of the reactor pulsing in the background made the air feel alive. He reached the corridor just as the sealed bulkhead began to spark. A moment later, it exploded inward, and smoke filled the hallway. 2 Ekthar soldiers stepped through. Tall, thin, and armored, with sleek weapons drawn. Kale ducked behind cover and fired. One bolt struck the wall beside an Ekthar's head. They returned fire, narrowly missing Kale's shoulder. Then another figure stepped through the smoke. Overseer Thalix. He was taller than the others, his armor marked with strange symbols. His eyes locked on Kale immediately. "You were the one who woke it," Thalix said, his voice deep and cold. Kale didn't answer. He simply raised his weapon again. Thalix raised a hand, signaling his soldiers to stop. "This ship is not a prize. It is a curse. You don't know what you've done." "I know enough," Kale replied. "You were planning something. This ship heard your plans." Thalix stepped forward. "You think the ship is here to protect you? It's not. It was designed to finish what your people started, a total cleansing. Entire worlds wiped clean. That weapon still sleeps inside this hole. And you've brought it back to life." Kale didn't move. His mind raced. "Then why are you here?" he asked. "If you're so afraid of it, why board it?" "To destroy it before it remembers everything," Thalix said. "Before it becomes what it was built to be." Suddenly, the floor trembled. A heavy vibration passed through the ship. "Warning," Siren said over the speaker. "Unauthorized access attempt detected in vault section. Containment protocol breached." Kale's heart dropped. "Who's accessing it?" he shouted. "Unknown," Siren replied. "Systems reacting autonomously. Protocol Omega awakening." Kale turned back to Thalix. The Overseer's face was tight with fear. "You triggered it," Kale said. "No," Thalix growled. "You did, the moment you powered the reactor." Without warning, Thalix charged. The two clashed in the corridor, Kale barely blocking the first blow. They fought close, desperate. Kale's blaster fired once, missing. Thalix slammed him into the wall, claws scraping Kale's armor. Kale managed to grab a metal pipe from the floor and struck Thalix across the face. The Overseer staggered back. Kale didn't wait. He pulled his sidearm and fired again. This time, the bolt hit Thalix in the shoulder. The Overseer fell to one knee, growling. "It's too late," he said. "Even if you kill me, you won't stop it." Kale stepped back, blood on his face, chest heaving. "Siren," he shouted. "Lock down vault section. Cancel Protocol Omega." A moment of silence. Then, acknowledged. Protocol Omega halted. Vault sealed. Threat contained. Kale lowered his weapon. Thalix slumped to the ground, unconscious. Alarms quieted. The hum of the reactor settled into a slow, steady rhythm. On the screen above, one Ekthar ship was disabled. The other two were retreating into the dark. Kale dropped to one knee, breathing hard. The Erebus was still alive, but so were its secrets. The battle was over. The Erebus drifted silently above the frozen world of Varela 9. Its hull was scarred, but intact. Smoke curled from parts of the damaged corridor where Kale had fought the Ekthar. Emergency lights blinked quietly across the bridge, but the main systems were back online. Life support had stabilized. Shield power was holding steady. For the first time in 1,000 years, the ship stood ready again. Kale sat alone in the command chair. His body ached. His face was bruised. His left arm was wrapped in a quick seal bandage, still throbbing from the fight with Thalix. He had survived. Barely. Below the bridge, in the medbay, Overseer Thalix lay unconscious in a sealed containment pod. Kale had ordered Siren not to harm him. Not out of sympathy, but because he needed answers. What had the Ekthar truly feared about this ship? What had Thalix meant when he said it would remember? "Siren," Kale said softly. "Status of the vault?" "Vault is secure," the AI replied. "Protocol Omega has been suspended. No further activation processes detected." Kale let out a long breath. The ship had come dangerously close to awakening its deadliest secret. He didn't know what Omega was in full detail, but he understood enough. It wasn't just a weapon. It was an end. A final, unspoken option, meant to destroy entire species if humanity ever faced extinction. And now, that option had stirred. "Begin transmission to Earth Command," Kale said. "Include all logs, enemy intercepts, and internal data. Mark it as highest priority." "Transmission initiated," Siren confirmed. "Estimated time to full upload, 6 hours." Kale leaned back in the chair, staring out the wide viewport. The stars glittered in the black void. Somewhere out there, people lived their lives peacefully, unaware that a ship forgotten by time had nearly reawakened the darkest chapter of human history. He opened his field journal and began to record. This is Lieutenant Cale Draven. Date, June 24th, 4221. I have boarded and reactivated the HMS Erebus, a warship believed lost during the Human-Ekthar War. This ship is not just a machine, it's a vault. A witness. A weapon too dangerous to exist, yet too valuable to forget. I have encountered proof that the Ekthar never stopped watching us. Their cloaked fleets are still active. They fear the ship, and perhaps they're right to. Protocol Omega exists. Project Final Echo exists. We built something terrible. We buried it. But we never really let it go. I leave this record for those who come after. This ship is not a relic. It is a warning. The past is not dead. It's just waiting to be heard. He closed the journal and stood slowly. His legs were still unsteady. He walked down the corridor toward the cryodeck, past the sealed vault, past the halls lined with empty rooms. This ship had once been full of life, crew members, officers, engineers. All gone now. Lost to time. He stopped before a long wall filled with nameplates, crew listed by division. A memorial built into the ship itself. Cale touched one of the plates. You were supposed to die forgotten. But now, your story will be told. Back on the bridge, the final data upload completed. The message was sent. Earth Command would receive it in 48 hours. The silence would finally be broken. Cale returned to the pilot's console and entered new coordinates. He wouldn't wait for reinforcements. He would fly the Erebus himself to the nearest outpost. Carefully, quietly. He had seen what the ship could do. He wouldn't let it fall into the wrong hands. As the engines powered up and the stars shifted slowly in the viewport, Siren spoke one last time. Commander, thank you. Cale gave a tired smile. Don't thank me yet. The Erebus turned away from Varela 9, its course set for human space. Behind it, the ice-covered planet remained quiet. And in its orbit, the void slowly closed again, dark, deep, and silent. But not forgotten.